Hello, I'm Tiffany Gibbs, class of 2010 alumni of Liberty University. I'm just finishing up HSER 508, a course in interpersonal communication, and today we're going to learn a little bit about talking less and listening more. Think of someone you know who listens well, someone who is good to talk to whenever you have a problem or something you want to discuss. What is it about their listening that makes it so effective? What does it feel like to listen to someone or have someone to listen to you? According to Burley Allen, of all the time we spend in communication, by far the greatest is spent in listening, about 40%. As important as listening is, why isn't that percentage much higher? Do we really know what listening is? Webster's dictionary defines listening as hearing something with thoughtful attention, giving full consideration. I found that listening is a learned skill. It is an active and not a passive process. Listening can increase one's self-esteem by showing the talker, you are important and I'm not judging you. Listening is also a powerful tool. Burley Allen states, true listening builds teamwork, trust, and creates a sense of belonging to a group. Now that we've defined listening, let me tell you a little bit about my goal for the course. I've learned that I can choose how I respond to an individual in any given situation. Stewart informs us that often people who express their opinions with absolute certainty have forgotten to reflect. To reach my goal, I must learn to reflect by asking questions when I'm unsure of what is going on. I've also noticed that when I want, I can be at any given level of listening. Level 1 listening is listening empathetically. Level 2 listening is hearing but not listening. Level 3 listening is listening in spurts. My goal is to get to level 1 and stay there. Listening from the heart, controlling my attitude about how or why I've received recognition, and showing desire and passion by practicing mindful listening, and increasing my self-awareness by listening to myself can all assist me in improving my listening skills and my interpersonal communications. This can enlarge my conversation. When important communication events take place, most participants share the aim of achieving the highest quality, most competent communication possible. I found that most times I'm a level 2 listener. This is when I don't concentrate or try to retain the information that the talker is saying. Not quite the level I'm searching for. Part of my desire to be an empathetic listener stems from a communication trap where I was the talker and a friend was the listener. The trap was the I understand communication, where she was not actually listening to my issue, but she was more talking about her understanding of my issue. I responded, "Excuse me, how can you possibly understand how I feel?" Needless to say, from that experience, I've learned how and when to talk and how and when to listen. Experiencing the other is another important aspect to achieving genuine dialogue and solid relationships. As I build solid relationships, I want to fireproof my relationships. At times, people are unaware of their listening habits and their talking habits. This can lead to destruction in relationships. We must be mindful, though, that the key to successful communication is whether or not our message has been understood and accepted by the listener in the same terms that we intended it. Now we'll discuss my behavioral blend. A primary factor that guides communicators as they make behavioral and interpretive decisions is that of maximizing self-perceived positives and minimizing self-perceived negatives. It is through our communication with others that we learn and affirm who we are. Throughout this journey, I've come to recognize that I am an I and a CIS personality. I now understand what that means. This blend is a character trait composite of who I am and how I relate to others. I agreed with quite a bit of the assessment, but some aspects I didn't agree with. The traits I've described here are the positive attributes that influence me in my daily interactions with people. I'm always positive, smiling, honest with what I feel, and I like to encourage, inspire, and influence others in any way that I can. But sometimes my honesty and optimism can negatively affect my communication. Let's see what some of those negative influences are. Burley Allen states, when we listen to ourselves, we can increase our self-awareness and begin to understand why we behave the way that we do. Not listening to myself causes me to be too optimistic, too trusting, and I end up doing things for other people's satisfaction and not necessarily the right things. Working on this aspect of listening to myself will help me focus on how I respond and experience others' behavior. These influences can be considered potential barriers to my communication. Let's look at some of these barriers. I've noted that I wear my feelings on my sleeve. Peterson explains this through his phrase, flat brain theory. This is when we allow our feelings to affect our thoughts, and they in turn affect how we relate to each other. I think sometimes I do my stomach and heart and head talking just as anybody else. But this moves us from level 1 listening and begins to attack the person that we're talking to. Not so good in interpersonal communication. Burley Allen infers one major barrier to effective listening is that in this society, we have equated speaking with mastery and power. Listening is very selective, and I must maintain presence in each situation by being perceptive, receptive, and attentive to my speaker. In my interactions with others, I must realize that both the talker and the listener both have power. Another listening barrier is what we've all heard at some point. We only hear what we want to hear. Our anxiety in particular situations causes us to hear incorrectly and oftentimes results in loss and embarrassment of you or others. Next is biased listening, a problem that I recognize I suffer from, especially if I've talked to someone and had a bad experience with them. But now to eliminate these barriers, I've incorporated the talker-listener card, figuring out communication traps, paying attention to when I'm listening, how I'm listening, and when I need to listen and when I need to talk. We also have internal and external pollutants. Internal noise pollution occurs when we are not aware of ourselves because we aren't listening to ourselves. We are sometimes unaware that we speak negatively to ourselves, which makes us non-productive, defensive, stressed out, and non-assertive. I've learned to listen to myself, and I've noticed the negative talk. But now I only speak to myself positively. As a result, speaking positive gives me a better outlook. I get more things accomplished, and I don't get so upset as quickly. I've become more aware of my internal thought processes, which have helped me to understand why I do certain things and why I react in certain ways. I've had my experience with the going nowhere cycle. Now I can firmly say that I'm in the going somewhere cycle. I've had an aha moment or two when I realized that my perfectionist attitude came from my belief system process that my mother has instilled in me regarding my pursuing my education and being the best at whatever it is that I do. Although my mom's intentions were good, I realized that I must do things for me and do it in my own time. This leads me to external noise pollution, where my beliefs about myself affect how I talk to others. The I always phenomenon has hindered me at times because I always want to say yes when I know I need to say no. What I've learned and begun to put into practice is that I always need to listen to myself in my quest for helping others. So have I reached my overarching goal? As I progressed through this course, I realized how ineffective I was at listening. I've learned that successful communication is dependent upon our ability to listen and understand others' needs and feelings in addition to speaking to be understood. What we need to figure out is, are we speaking in a way that others understand? And even more importantly, are we listening in a way for others to be understood? To reach my goal of talking less and listening more, and getting to that level 1 listening, I must remain an empathetic listener. I must have the passion and desire to listen with the intent to understand. I must acknowledge others' viewpoints, even when I disagree. I must be able to listen to nonverbal as well as verbal cues. Peterson has taught me to paraphrase and summarize to empathetically understand others. Stewart has taught me to be a mindful listener. Burley Allen has taught me to listen to myself. I now have these tools and will apply them to my life and become the level 1 listener that I aim to be. I hope you've learned something from this presentation. Thank you for listening.